The pen felt heavier than it should have, as Emma Martinez stared at the divorce papers spread across the mahogany table in attorney Sarah Chen's downtown Seattle office. Rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting streaks down. The glass-like tears she refused to shed. Not here, not now. "Take your time, Emma," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying the practiced compassion of someone who had witnessed too many marriages dissolve in this very room. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the Mont Blanc pen. Ironically, a gift from Mark on their 5th anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using his gift to sign away their decade-long marriage. 10 years. The number echoed in her mind like a funeral bell. 10 years of waiting for him to come home for dinner before it got cold. 10 years of falling asleep alone while he worked late at the architecture firm, chasing promotions that never seemed to satisfy him. 10 years of conversations that felt more like scheduling meetings than intimate exchanges between spouses. "Emma?" Sarah's voice pulled her back to the present. "Sorry, Emma cleared her throat, straightening her shoulders. She had made this decision months ago, had lived with it, breathed it, dreamed about it. The hard part was supposed to be over. The signature flowed across the page, Emma Louise Martinez, sealing the end of what had once been the greatest love story of her life. Her married name would remain the same professionally, but everything else was about to change. "That's it then," Sarah said, gathering the papers with efficient movements. "The decree will be final tomorrow morning. You're free, Emma. Free." The word should have felt liberating, but instead, it sat in her chest, like a stone. Emma stood, smoothing down her navy blue dress. The one Mark used to say brought out her eyes. She wouldn't be wearing it again. The elevator ride down felt eternal. 37 floors of watching numbers descend, each one marking another step away from the life she'd built and toward... What? The question terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Seattle's Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual afternoon energy as Emma walked through, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. The familiar chaos of vendors calling out prices, tourists snapping photos, and the smell of fresh flowers and coffee should have been comforting. Instead, everything felt muted, like she was watching life through frosted glass. Her phone buzzed. Mark's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, her heart lurched with the old familiar hope. But it was just a text about picking up his remaining belongings. No acknowledgement of what today meant. No recognition that their marriage had officially ended just hours ago. Emma deleted the message without responding. Her Capitol Hill apartment felt different when she unlocked the door that evening. Smaller somehow, but also more hers than any space had felt in years. She'd moved out of their Belltown condo 3 months ago, unable to bear the ghost of their relationship haunting every corner. The apartment was sparse, just the essentials she'd taken and a few pieces of furniture she'd bought secondhand. But it was clean, quiet, and filled with possibility. She'd painted the bedroom a soft sage green, a color Mark had always dismissed as too feminine. Now, in the lamplight, it felt like a gentle embrace. Emma poured herself a glass of the Malbec she'd been saving, not for celebration exactly, but for closure. She settled onto her small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. The Space Needle stood sentinel in the distance, just as it had every night of her married life, but tonight, it felt like it was standing guard over something new. Her phone rang, shattering the peaceful silence. Mark's photo filled the screen, the one from their honeymoon in Santorini, both of them sun-kissed and laughing. She'd never changed it, clinging to the memory of who they used to be. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. On the 4th call, she answered. "Emma, thank God." Mark's voice was strained, breathless. "I just heard from my lawyer. The papers are filed. It's really happening." "Yes, Mark. It's really happening. We talked about this. We've been talking about this for months. But I hoped you might change your mind. That we could try counseling again. Or, we tried counseling. Emma's voice was steady, but her free hand gripped the balcony railing. 3 different therapists, remember? You quit showing up to every single one. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of every missed session, every canceled dinner, every promise to do better that had evaporated by the next day. I know I screwed up, Mark said finally. I know I wasn't the husband you deserved. But Emma, I love you. That has to count for something. The words she'd longed to hear for years now felt hollow. Too little and far too late. Love isn't just a feeling, Mark. It's a choice. It's showing up. It's making the person you claim to love feel like they matter more than your next project or promotion. I can change. I am changing. The promotion went through. I'm finally making partner. Things will be different now. I can provide better for us. Take you on those trips we always talked about. You still don't get it. Emma closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones. I never needed you to provide more. I needed you to be present. I needed you to choose me, choose us, over work just once. Just once, Mark. She could hear him breathing on the other, and could almost picture him in his office, because of course he was calling from the office, even now. Emma, please, don't throw away 10 years. Don't throw away us. I'm not throwing anything away, she said quietly. I'm finally picking up the pieces of myself that I lost trying to hold us together alone. She hung up before he could respond and turned off her phone. The silence that followed felt sacred. For the first time in years, Emma sat with her own, thoughts without the constant background hum of anxiety about Mark's mood, his schedule, his needs. The relief was overwhelming. She stayed on the balcony until the wine was gone, and the city had settled into its late-night rhythm. Tomorrow, she would wake up officially divorced. Tomorrow, she would start the rest of her life. But tonight, she mourned. Not just for Mark, but for the woman she'd been when they met. Confident, passionate, full of dreams that had slowly been ground down by years of making herself smaller to accommodate someone else's ambitions. As she finally headed to bed, Emma caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her face looked different somehow, softer around the eyes, but stronger in the jaw. The woman staring back at her looked like someone she might want to get to know. For the first time in months, Emma slept through the night without waking up, reaching for someone who was never there. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows. Actual sunlight, not the gray drizzle that had dominated Seattle for the past week. She lay still for a moment, letting the warmth touch her face, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Her phone, still turned off from the night before, remained silent on the nightstand. No urgent messages about Mark's schedule, no last-minute cancellations, no hollow good morning texts sent from the office. Just quiet. She padded to the kitchen and started her morning ritual, grinding fresh coffee beans, a luxury she'd denied herself during the marriage because Mark preferred the convenience of a Keurig. The rich aroma filled the small space, and Emma found herself actually smiling as she prepared her first cup of coffee as an officially divorced woman. The French press had been a gift to herself when she'd moved into the apartment. Such a small thing, but it represented something larger, the permission to slow down, to savor, to choose quality over convenience. Emma settled onto her small balcony with her coffee and the morning paper, another indulgence Mark had deemed unnecessary in the digital age. But she loved the feel of newsprint between her fingers, the ritual of turning actual pages. These little acts of self-care felt revolutionary after years of molding herself to someone else's preferences. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, no relation, to her lawyer, was tending to her garden on the balcony below. The elderly woman looked up and waved. Beautiful morning, isn't it, dear? Mrs. Chen called up in her accented English. It really is, Emma replied, and meant it. You look different today. Lighter, somehow. Emma smiled. I feel lighter. It was true. The constant knot of tension she'd carried in her shoulders for years had loosened. The perpetual anxiety about when Mark would come home, what mood he'd be in, whether she'd done something wrong. All of it was gone. She was halfway through the arts section when the doorbell rang. Emma frowned, checking her phone for the time. 9:47 a.m. She wasn't expecting anyone, and deliveries usually came later in the day. She set down her coffee, suddenly aware that she was still in her pajamas, soft cotton shorts and an oversized University of Washington t-shirt from her graduate program. The bell rang again, followed by rapid knocking. Emma, please, I know you're there. Her blood turned to ice. Mark's voice, raw and desperate in a way she'd never heard before. She crept to the peephole and peered out. Mark stood in the hallway, and the sight of him made her heart lurch. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. Hair mussed, 5 o'clock shadow despite the early hour, eyes red-rimmed. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. He looked broken. Emma, please. I need to talk to you. His voice cracked, and she watched in shock as he leaned his forehead against her door. I can't do this. I can't lose you. She'd dreamed of this moment for years. Mark finally realizing what he'd lost, finally fighting for their marriage. But now that it was happening, all she felt was a strange, detached sadness. Go home, Mark, she said through the door. No. His voice was muffled but determined. Not until you hear me out. Not until you understand. I understand perfectly. You got the divorce papers yesterday, and now suddenly you care. It's too late. It's not too late. The desperation in his voice was startling. Emma, I quit. She froze. What? I quit. Yesterday, right after you hung up on me. I walked into Peterson's office and I quit. I turned down the partnership. I told them I was done. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's career had been everything to him. More important than birthdays, anniversaries, weekend plans, or quiet evenings at home. The idea that he would walk away from the promotion he'd sacrificed their marriage for was incomprehensible. You're lying, she whispered. I'm not. Emma, please, just open the door. Let me show you. Let me prove that I've changed. Against her better judgment, Emma found herself reaching for the deadbolt. But she stopped, her hand hovering over the lock. How many times had she opened doors for Mark, literal and metaphorical, only to have him walk through them and disappear? Again? Emma? Mark's voice was softer now, pleading. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've broken every promise I ever made to you, but I'm here now. I'm choosing you now. Where were you when I needed you to choose me every day for the past 5 years? The question came out sharper than she intended. Where were you when I was eating dinner alone every night? Where were you when I was crying myself to sleep because I felt invisible in my own marriage? Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of Mrs. Chen's wind chimes on the floor below. I was being an idiot, Mark said finally. I was so focused on building what I thought was our future that I forgot to live in our present. I thought if I could just make enough money, get enough recognition, prove myself enough, then I could be the husband you deserved. Emma closed her eyes, leaning against the door. How many times had she heard variations of this speech? How many times had she believed that things would change once the next promotion came through, once the next project was finished, once the next goal was achieved? But I was wrong, Mark continued. I was so wrong, Emma. You never needed me to be successful. You needed me to be there, and I wasn't. I chose work over you every single day. And I told myself it was for us. But it was really for me. For my ego. For my fear that I wasn't enough just as I was. The honesty in his voice was new. In 10 years of marriage, Mark had never admitted to fear, never acknowledged that his relentless ambition might stem from insecurity rather than strength. I spent all night walking around the city, he said, just walking and thinking about all the moments I missed. Your birthday last year when I took that conference call during dinner, our anniversary when I promised we'd go to that little inn on Whidbey Island, but I canceled because of the Morrison project. The night you had food poisoning and I stayed at the office until midnight because I said I couldn't afford to fall behind. Emma remembered that night. She'd been violently ill, and when she'd called Mark asking him to come home, he'd suggested she call her sister instead. She'd never felt more alone in her life. I remember all of it, she said quietly. I know you do, and I know sorry isn't enough. I know I can't undo the years of choosing everything else over you. But Emma, I'm here now. I'm standing in your hallway looking like hell because for the first time in my life, nothing matters more than this. Nothing matters more than you. Emma could hear the tears in his voice, and despite everything, her heart ached for him. This was the man she'd fallen in love with in college. Vulnerable, real, unguarded. Before the suits and the networking events and the 60-hour work weeks, but it was also the man who had let her cry alone too many nights to count. Mark, she said softly, I believe that you mean what you're saying right now. I believe that you're hurting and that you want to change. But I can't base my life on what you might become. I have to base it on what you've shown me you are. I know I've been a terrible husband. I know I've taken you for granted and made you feel like you didn't matter. But I see it now, Emma. I see what I've done, and I can't live with it. You're going to have to live with it, Emma said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Because I can't live with it anymore. She heard him slide down the door, and she pictured him sitting in the hallway, probably not caring who saw him. Probably not thinking about what his colleagues would say if they could see the ambitious Mark Rodriguez crying in an apartment hallway. I love you, he whispered. I know I didn't show it, but I love you so much, Emma. You're the best part of my life. You're the only part that matters. The words she'd longed to hear for years now felt like salt in a wound that was finally starting to heal. Love isn't just words, Mark. It's time. It's attention. It's showing up, even when it's inconvenient. It's choosing someone over and over again, not just when you're afraid of losing them. I know that now. God, Emma, I know that now. But knowing it now doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give me back the years I spent begging for crumbs of your attention. It doesn't erase the nights I went to bed feeling unwanted in my own marriage. Emma pressed her palm against the door, imagining she could feel his warmth on the other side. Part of her, the part that had loved him for 10 years, wanted to open the door, wanted to believe that this time was different. But a stronger part of her, the part that had found peace in solitude, the part that had learned to value herself enough to walk away, knew better. I'm going to call building security if you don't leave, she said gently. Not because I want to hurt you, but because I need to protect myself. I need to protect the peace I've finally found. She heard him stand up, heard his footsteps moving, away from the door, then coming back. Emma? His voice was small, defeated. Are you happy? Without me? Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. In all their arguments, all their failed attempts at reconciliation, Mark had never asked about her happiness. He'd talked about love, about promises, about trying harder, but never about whether she was actually happy. Yes, she said, and realized it was true. For the first time in years, I'm happy. She heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard the elevator ding, heard the doors close. Only then did she unlock her door and peer out. The hallway was empty, except for a small piece of paper on the floor. Emma picked it up. In Mark's familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry I'm too late. I'm sorry I waited until I lost you to realize how much you meant to me. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday I can forgive myself." She folded the note carefully and went back inside, locking the door behind her. Her coffee had gone cold, but the sun was still shining through her windows. Mrs. Chen was still humming while she tended her plants. The world had kept turning, just as it always had. Emma made fresh coffee and returned to her balcony, but she couldn't concentrate on the newspaper. Instead, she found herself thinking about the future. Not the life she'd planned with Mark, but the life she was building for herself. She thought about the painting classes she'd always wanted to take, the novel she'd started writing in college, and abandoned when marriage and Mark's career demands consumed her time. The friends she'd lost touch with because Mark found them frivolous or unprofessional. For the first time in years, Emma felt excited about what came next. It was terrifying and exhilarating and entirely her own. She was still sitting on the balcony when her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Lisa. "How are you holding up? First day of freedom and all." Emma smiled and typed back, "Better than expected. Want to have lunch? I have some news." "Good news or bad news?" "Complicated news, but I think hopeful news." As she got ready to meet her sister, Emma caught sight of herself in the mirror again. The woman looking back at her was the same one from the night before, but somehow even stronger. She'd faced Mark's desperate plea and chosen herself. She'd listened to the man she'd loved for 10 years, beg for another chance, and walked away with her boundaries intact. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, and she'd never felt more proud of herself. 3 weeks had passed since Mark's desperate plea in the hallway, and Emma was discovering what it meant to live without the constant undercurrent of anxiety that had defined her marriage. She'd started those painting classes she'd always talked about, joined a book club, and, most surprisingly, agreed to a coffee date with Daniel, a fellow grad student from her University of Washington alumni group. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was possibility. And possibility felt like breathing after holding her breath for years. Emma was touching up the sage green paint in her bedroom on a Saturday morning when her phone rang. Lisa's name appeared on the screen. "Please tell me you're not still painting," Lisa said without preamble. "It's a gorgeous day, and you promised we'd go to the farmer's market." "Just finishing up," Emma said, wiping her hands on an old t-shirt. "Give me 20 minutes to shower and I'll meet you there." "Actually, there's something I need to tell you first." Something in Lisa's tone made Emma set down her paintbrush. Her sister's voice carried that careful quality it had when she was about to deliver bad news. "What's wrong?" "I ran into Mark yesterday. At the Starbucks on Pine Street." Emma's stomach tightened. "Okay." He looks awful. I mean, really awful. He's lost weight, his face is all gaunt, and he was just sitting there, staring at nothing. I almost didn't recognize him." Emma sank onto her bed, conflicted emotions warring in her chest. She'd worked hard to build walls around the part of her that still cared about Mark's well-being, but Lisa's words were threatening to breach them. "Did he see you?" "Yeah. He asked about you. Asked if you were okay, if you were happy." I told him, "You were doing great, which you are, but I think he's having some kind of breakdown." "That's not my responsibility anymore," Emma said. But even as the words left her mouth, they felt rehearsed, like something she was telling herself more than believing. I know it's not. But he told me he's been going to therapy. Real therapy, not couples counseling. He said he's trying to understand why he sabotaged everything good in his life." Emma closed her eyes. "Lisa, why are you telling me this?" "Because I've never seen someone look so destroyed. And because, despite everything he put you through, I know you still care about him." It was true. and Emma hated that it was true. Loving someone for 10 years didn't just disappear because they'd hurt you. It transformed, became something more complicated, grief mixed with anger, sadness mixed with relief. He made his choices, Emma said. For years, he made choices that showed me exactly where I ranked in his priorities. I can't save him from the consequences of those choices. I'm not asking you to save him. I thought you should know. After they hung up, Emma found herself unable to focus on painting or market plans or anything else. She kept picturing Mark as Lisa had described him, hollow-eyed, diminished. It was an image that didn't match the confident, driven man she'd married, or even the desperate but still put-together man who'd shown up at her door. She was still, wrestling with these thoughts when her doorbell rang that afternoon. For a moment, her heart jumped. Was it Mark again? But when she looked through the peephole, she saw a young woman she didn't recognize, holding what looked like a business card. "Can I help you?" Emma asked through the door. "Ms. Martinez?" "My name is Rachel Kim. I'm a reporter with the Seattle Times. I was hoping I could speak with you about your ex-husband's resignation from Hartwell and Associates." Emma's blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mark Rodriguez?" He was in line for partner at one of the city's most prestigious architecture firms when he abruptly resigned 3 weeks ago. It's been the talk of the industry. I'm writing a piece about the pressures of corporate culture, and I was hoping you might provide some insight into— "No," Emma said firmly. "I don't have any comment, and I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me alone." "Ms. Martinez, I understand this might be difficult, but the public has a right to know about the toxic work environments that are destroying marriages and families. Your story could help other women who—" Emma unlocked her door and opened it just wide enough for the reporter to see her face. "My story is my own. My marriage is my own. And my divorce is my own. If you want to write about corporate culture, find someone else to exploit for your article." She closed the door firmly and locked it, her hands shaking. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it off and sat on her couch, feeling exposed and violated. How had a reporter found out about her divorce? How had they connected it to Mark's resignation? The idea that her private pain was being turned into a news story made her feel sick. Emma forced herself to turn her phone back on and called the one person she trusted to give her straight answers, Sarah Chen. "Sarah, it's Emma Martinez. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. What's going on?" "A reporter just showed up at my apartment asking about Mark's resignation and our divorce. How would she know to connect those things? How would she even know about the divorce?" Silence stretched over the line, and Emma's heart sank. "Sarah?" "Emma, divorce filings are public record. Anyone can look them up. And if your husband's resignation was as dramatic as it sounds, it wouldn't be hard for a reporter to put two and two together." "How dramatic?" Emma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "I've heard rumors." "Emma, are you aware of how he resigned?" "He said he quit. He said he turned down the partnership. From what I've heard, it was more than that. He apparently walked into a partners meeting, told them exactly what he thought of their work-life balance expectations, and announced that he was done prioritizing career over humanity. He specifically mentioned that their culture had cost him his marriage." Emma felt dizzy. "He said that? In front of the partners?" "That's what I heard." "Emma, he didn't just quit quietly. He made a statement, a very public statement about what matters more than success." After hanging up with Sarah, Emma sat in her quiet apartment and tried to process this information. The Mark she'd known would never have burned bridges like that. He would never have chosen principle over networking, integrity over advancement. But then again, the Mark she'd known would never have shown up crying at her doorstep either. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Mark. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know about the reporter before you heard it from someone else. I never mentioned your name to anyone, but I'm not surprised they found you. I'm sorry. I never wanted our private business to become public." Emma stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Why did you really resign?" The response came quickly. "Because sitting in that conference room, listening to them talk about billable hours and client retention like they were the only things that mattered, all I could think about was you eating dinner alone while I stayed late to impress people who didn't care if I lived or died. I realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone you couldn't love, and I couldn't pretend it was worth it anymore." Emma set her phone aside without responding. She walked to her bathroom mirror and looked at herself, really looked. The woman staring back had color in her cheeks, brightness in her eyes. She looked alive in a way she hadn't in years. Mark's grand gesture, his dramatic resignation, his newfound self-awareness. It was all real, she believed that. But it was also too late. Not because she was vindictive or unforgiving, but because she had already grieved their marriage. She had already done the hard work of rebuilding herself without him. Love, she was learning, wasn't just about feeling. It was about timing. It was about being ready to receive what someone was offering when they were ready to offer it. And Mark was finally ready to offer her the marriage she'd always wanted right at the moment when she no longer needed it from him. Emma turned off her phone and spent the rest of the day painting. She painted the spare bedroom a warm yellow, the color of hope and new beginnings. She painted with purpose, with joy, with the steady hands of someone who had finally found her footing. When she was finished, she stood back and admired her work. The room looked like sunshine, like possibility, like home. For the first time since her marriage ended, Emma felt grateful for the pain that had brought her to this moment. She felt grateful for Mark's neglect, because it had taught her to value attention. She felt grateful for his absence, because it had taught her to enjoy her own company. She felt grateful for his broken promises, because they had taught her to keep promises to herself. She was painting her own life now, in colors Mark had never appreciated, with strokes he had never understood, and it was beautiful. 2 months after the reporter incident, Emma had established a rhythm to her new life that felt both foreign and natural. Tuesday evenings were for painting class, where she'd discovered she had an unexpected talent for watercolors. Thursday nights were book club with a group of women who'd become genuine friends, rather than just professional networking contacts. Weekends were for farmers markets, long walks around Green Lake, and, increasingly, coffee dates with Daniel. Daniel Chen, no relation to her lawyer or neighbor, as Seattle's coincidence factor never ceased to amaze her, was everything Mark wasn't. Present, curious about her thoughts, genuinely interested in how her day had gone. He taught environmental science at the University of Washington and had the kind of passion for his work that enhanced rather than consumed his life. "You seem different today," Daniel observed as they walked through the university district after grabbing coffee. It was one of those perfect Seattle October days. Crisp air, golden leaves, the kind of weather that made you remember why you loved the Pacific Northwest, despite the gray months. "Different how?" Emma asked, adjusting her scarf. She'd bought it the week before, emerald green silk that Mark would have called impractical, but that made her feel elegant and confident. Lighter, I guess. More settled. When I first met you, you had this look in your eyes like you were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Emma considered this. I think I was. I spent so many years braced for disappointment that I forgot what it felt like to just exist without anxiety. And now? Now I wake up and think about what I want to do with my day instead of what might go wrong. Daniel smiled, and Emma felt that flutter of possibility she was still getting used to. They'd been seeing each other for 6 weeks now, taking things slowly, building something based on genuine compatibility, rather than the desperate need to be loved that had characterized her early relationship with Mark. "There is something I should probably tell you," Emma said as they reached her building. My situation is complicated. She'd been dreading this conversation, but Daniel deserved to know what he was potentially getting into. Over coffee, she gave him the abbreviated version: 10-year marriage, workaholic husband, messy divorce, dramatic resignation, media attention. So you're telling me you're famous? Daniel teased when she finished. Infamous, maybe. The article never ran, thank God, but I know people talk. Seattle's architecture community isn't that big. Emma, Daniel said seriously, I don't care about any of that. I care about who you are now, not who you used to be married to. It was such a simple statement, but it hit Emma with unexpected force. For so long, her identity had been tied up in being Mark's wife, in managing his career needs, in being the supportive partner of a rising star. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be valued for herself. They were saying goodbye at her building entrance when Emma's phone buzzed. Mark's name appeared on the screen, and Daniel noticed her face change. Take it, he said gently. I'll talk to you later. Emma watched him walk away. No drama, no demands for explanation, just quiet understanding, before answering the call. Hello, Mark. Emma. Hi. How are you? His voice sounded stronger than it had in their last few brief exchanges, more like the man she'd married, but without the edge of arrogance that had developed over the years. I'm well. How are you doing? Better. Different. I wanted to call because I heard about the Times article getting killed. I know that whole thing was invasive and awful, and I'm sorry. It's fine. It's over. I also wanted you to know that I'm seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. Dr. Sarah Hoffman. She specializes in workaholism and relationship issues. Emma felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. That's good, Mark. I'm glad you're getting help. She's helping me understand a lot of things, about why I always felt like I had to prove myself, why I could never just be present, why I sabotaged the best thing in my life. There was a pause, and Emma could hear Seattle traffic in the background. She wondered where he was, what his life looked like now. Emma, I need you to know that I understand now. I understand that this isn't about me proving I've changed or winning you back. This is about me becoming the person I should have been all along, whether or not you're part of my life. That's very mature of you, Emma said, and meant it. Dr. Hoffman says that real change doesn't happen because you want something from someone else. It happens because you finally understand what you need from yourself. What do you need from yourself? To stop running. To stop believing that I'm only valuable if I'm achieving something. To learn how to be still. How to be present. How to find worth in just being. Emma closed her eyes, leaning against her building's brick facade. This was the conversation she'd longed for throughout their marriage. Mark actually examining his behavior, taking responsibility, showing real insight into his patterns. I'm proud of you, she said softly. I know how hard it is to look at yourself honestly. I should have done it years ago. I should have done it when you first told me you were unhappy, or when you started crying yourself to sleep, or when you asked me to choose you just once. But you didn't, Emma said gently. And that's okay now. We both learned what we needed to learn. What did you learn? The question surprised her with its genuine curiosity. I learned that I'm enough. Just me, by myself. I learned that I'd rather be alone than lonely in a relationship. I learned that love shouldn't require you to make yourself smaller. I made you smaller, Mark said quietly. We made each other smaller. I let myself disappear bit by bit, instead of fighting for who I was. I chose to stay and be miserable instead of leaving and being happy. Are you happy? Emma thought about her morning painting sessions, her evening walks, her easy conversations with Daniel, the way she'd laughed until her sides hurt at book club the week before. Yes, she said. I really am. Good. That's what I wanted. I know it's too late for us, but I needed to know that you're okay. That you're more than okay. I am. And Mark, I hope you find happiness too. Real happiness, not just success. I'm working on it. Dr. Hoffman says it's a process. After they hung up, Emma stood outside her building for a few minutes, processing the conversation. There had been no desperation in Mark's voice this time, no hidden agenda, no attempt to manipulate her emotions. Just genuine concern for her well-being and honest acknowledgement of his mistakes. It was the closure she hadn't known she needed. Emma climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind already shifting to the evening ahead. She had a watercolor piece to finish, a Seattle skyline from her balcony view, painted in the soft pastels of dawn. It was the first piece she'd ever painted that felt truly hers, uncomplicated by anyone else's preferences or expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Thanks for being honest about everything. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? There's a new Vietnamese place in Fremont I've been wanting to try. Emma smiled and typed back, I'd love that. As she unlocked her apartment door, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror one more time. The woman looking back was someone she recognized now. Not the eager-to-please girl who'd married, Mark, or the bitter, resentful wife who'd spent years trying to change him, but someone entirely new. Someone who had learned that the most radical act of love was sometimes letting go. She thought about the quote she'd written on a sticky note and placed on her bathroom mirror weeks ago. You are not a rehabilitation center for broken men. But now she realized it was deeper than that. She wasn't a rehabilitation center for anyone, including herself. She was just a woman learning to live authentically, to choose joy over familiarity, to build a life that honored who she was becoming rather than who she'd always been. Emma heated up leftover Thai food from her favorite place, the one Mark had always complained was too spicy, and settled onto her balcony with her dinner and a glass of wine. The Seattle skyline stretched before her, twinkling with thousands of lights representing thousands of lives, thousands of stories, thousands of people navigating love and loss and everything in between. Her phone rang one more time. Lisa's name appeared on the screen. Hey, sis, Emma answered. Hey, yourself. I just wanted to check in. How was your day with Daniel? Good, really good. And I talked to Mark. Oh? How did that go? It was peaceful. He's in therapy, really dealing with his issues, and he genuinely seems to want me to be happy, even if it's not with him. That's big of him. Too little, too late, but big. Emma laughed. That's very diplomatic of you. I'm practicing. So things are good with Daniel? Things are good with me. Daniel is just a nice addition to that. Listen to you. Being all healthy and self-actualized. I know, right? Who would have thought? They talked for another 20 minutes about Lisa's new job, their parents' upcoming visit, plans for Thanksgiving. Normal sister conversation. Free from the undercurrent of worry that had characterized their calls during Emma's marriage. After hanging up, Emma sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the city sounds below. A couple was arguing in the building, across the street. She could see their silhouettes in the lit window, could hear the raised voices even if she couldn't make out words. For a moment, she felt a pang of recognition, remembering all the times she and Mark had stood in similar windows, having similar fights. But then she let the feeling pass. That was someone else's story now. Her story was here, in this small apartment with its sage-green walls and watercolor paintings, with its full bookshelves and the smell of good coffee and the quiet contentment of a life lived on her own terms. Emma finished her wine and went inside to work on her painting. She'd been struggling with the Space Needle, getting the proportions right, capturing the way it seemed to pierce the sky. But tonight, her brush moved with confidence, adding the final details that brought the whole piece together. When she stepped back to look at it, Emma felt a surge of pride. It wasn't perfect. There were amateur mistakes she could see clearly, but it was hers. She'd created something beautiful, something that hadn't existed before she imagined it into being. It struck her that this was what her life had become. A work of art she was creating one brushstroke at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. Some days the colors were muddy. Some days the composition felt off. But she was learning to trust the process, to believe that each mistake was just part of the larger picture taking shape. Emma cleaned her brushes and prepared for bed, following the routine she'd developed over the past few months. Chamomile tea, a few pages of whatever book club was reading, a few minutes of writing in the journal Dr. Martinez, her therapist, not her ex-husband, had recommended. Tonight she wrote, "I think I understand now what people mean when they talk about finding yourself. It's not about discovering some hidden essential self that was always there. It's about making choices, hundreds of small daily choices that align with who you want to become. It's about choosing growth over comfort, authenticity over approval, your own voice over the voices that tell you who you should be." She paused, pen hovering over the page, then added, "I chose Mark for 10 years. I chose to stay, to compromise, to hope, to make excuses. Those weren't wrong choices. They were the choices I needed to make to learn what I've learned. But now I choose me. I choose my peace, my joy, my growth, my future. And that feels like the rightest choice I've ever made." Emma closed the journal and settled into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Through her bedroom window, she could see a few stars managing to shine through Seattle's city lights. Tomorrow she would wake up to another day of her new life. Coffee on the balcony, maybe a walk around the neighborhood, dinner with Daniel, the slow, sweet work of building something real with someone who saw her clearly. But tonight, she fell, asleep smiling, wrapped in the profound contentment of a woman who had finally learned to love herself enough to choose happiness over history, hope over habit, and her own beautiful, imperfect future over someone else's broken promises. In the morning, Emma would wake up to sunlight streaming through her windows, to the sound of Mrs. Chen humming in her garden below, to the promise of another day lived entirely on her own terms. She would make coffee with her French press, read the newspaper on her balcony, and feel grateful for every single choice that had brought her to this moment. She would think about Mark, briefly and without pain, hoping he was finding his own version of peace. She would think about Daniel, with anticipation and affection, but without desperation. She would think about her sister, her friends, her painting, her work, the book she was slowly writing, all the threads of a life that was finally, beautifully, completely her own. But most of all, she would think about how far she'd come from the woman who had signed those divorce papers 6 months ago, scared, heartbroken, but determined to build something better from the pieces of what had been broken. That woman had been brave enough to let go. This woman was brave enough to hold on, to joy, to possibility, to the radical idea that she deserved a love that didn't require her to disappear. And in the end, that made all the difference.